All right, fight fans, we don't do this often. On the opening bell, we usually talk news, but only when the guest is this important. Our guy, formerly from ESPN Now, Dan Raphael's Substack.com, and his new platform, Fight Freaks Unite. Make sure you guys subscribe to that. Our guy, Dan Raphael.
What's up, brother?
How's it going, guys? Great to be on with you, my friends.
Likewise. Appreciate you taking the time, man. A lot going on in boxing. I want to jump right into the hot topic right now, and that's Oscar Valdez, WBC, PEDs. First off, we've been talking about it, all week, Dan, but in your opinion, with all the information that you've gathered, why is the Oscar Valdez fight still taking place?
It's not that complicated of a answer, to be honest with you. The location that the fight is taking place in, which is at the Casino del Sol in Tucson, Arizona, it is overseen by the tribal commission there. The tribal commission, much like virtually every commission and state athletic commission in the United States, in 2000, I forget what it was, maybe like almost 10 years ago, 2011, most of them signed on to the ABCs rules. That's the Association of Boxing Commissions, which basically agreed that in terms of drug testing, that they would adhere to the WADA code, the World Anti-Doping Association. And the WADA code has specific rules of what's banned and what's not banned and when it's banned, et cetera. And in the case of Oscar Valdez, this phentermine, which is a stimulant that he tested positive for in a VADA test, which is the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, which is separate from WADA. The WADA rules, the code by which that the local commission goes by, that substance is allowable. It's not considered a banned substance only until you're quote unquote in competition. They define in competition very clearly. It's the 11:59 p.m. the day before your competition, whether it's a boxing match, a swimming race, a track and field event, whatever. So he tested positive for that substance on a test that was given to him on August 13th, way, way, way beyond being in competition. So as far as WADA code is concerned, he didn't do anything wrong. He is free and clear. I'm not saying the guy should use this stuff or whatever. I'm just giving you the factual information. He had a test that was a couple of days or whatever right before that one that was positive. He has since had tests beyond that August 13th that have been negative. So it's certainly clear from his system. And again, in the opinion of the experts who actually have to make the decisions, they're okay with it. Now, the one caveat to that, guys, is I understand the sort of people who are upset because the WBC is still sanctioning it as a title fight. And the reason I say that is because even though he may not be in violation of the local commission rules that are regulating the event, the WBC has a clean boxing program, which is dramatically underfunded, but they do their best, I think, and they're the only sanctioning organization that has a legitimate testing protocol of any kind. They contract with VADA. So the WBC, by that standard, follows the VADA rules. Now, the commission is the one that can say whether an athlete competes in the fight or not. But the WBC, their role in this is they can't tell you you're suspended as a fighter, but what they do control is the belt. So they could have refused to sanction the fight. There are some that say, you know what, if it's within the rules of the local commission to allow the fight to take place, that's one thing, but that the WBC is being hypocritical by allowing him to still retain the world title. That's certainly a conversation that is, I understand that aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a great point. Now, unfortunately, because of social media and just the internet, and folks can consume so much content easily, it's a snowball effect. Even though he's not in violations, but it turns into guys like Caleb Plant attacking the entire Reynoso team now, insinuating that all of these guys are on PEDs. And meanwhile, he's actually not even in violation. I mean, what's your take on the reaction from some of the fighters like a Caleb Plant?
I don't have anything bad to say about Caleb Plant. He's, I like Caleb Plant an awful lot. And I just feel like this is in general terms. It's not just boxers, it's fans in general, people that like you say, may read a story or see a tweet that this substance was found in his system that may be against the VADA rules. But again, the local place that's conducting the regulation, it's permissible, end of story. So I just feel like people don't, there's no such thing as nuance on Twitter, as I'm sure you guys know. Nobody bothers to get all the facts. They don't really understand. God forbid there's a gray area in something. Like everything, it seems to be, has to be black or white. I mean, you mentioned about Eddie Reynoso's team. Obviously, his main superstar in the stable is Canelo Alvarez, who had his own issues several years ago with a positive clenbuterol test that drew him a 6-month suspension and a fine from the Nevada Commission, forced a postponement, a cancellation at the time of the rematch he was supposed to have with Triple G. People to this day, they proclaim Canelo as a drug cheat. I just don't agree with that because for a variety of reasons. The amount of clenbuterol in his system was absolutely minuscule based on the science and the numbers and all that. Secondly, it was based on that, by all expert accounts, absolutely viewed as legit contamination from meat, which is a huge problem in Mexico. The national soccer team had the problem. If you just Google it for 2 seconds, there's 1,000 cases of athletes of all kinds that come from Mexico that have had that because the farmers there use clenbuterol in raising their livestock and it stays in the beef. And therefore, it gets into the person that consumes that beef into their system, and you would test positive for a trace amount. The same thing happened to Eric Morales. It's happened to a number of fighters. And furthermore, again, not to harp on this one particular instance, like I'm just making the point that people don't do their homework. Canelo passed a hair follicle test, which clenbuterol would stay in your system for only so long, but it would stay in your hair follicles for months and months and months. It was nothing in there consistent with contamination. And beyond that, the WBC was following certain rules. WADA took into account the legitimate issue of meat contamination, and they actually, in a small amount, but they raised the threshold of the amount of clenbuterol that an athlete could have in their system. Now, that said, if it's a legit case of a guy using a performance-enhancing drug and he's caught hardcore, and I'll give you an example recently, I've written extensively about what happened with Jean Pascal, the former light heavyweight champion, and was a good fighter for a long time. He had like 4 or 5 different things in multiple tests that was obviously hardcore steroid stuff, not a trace amount of a stimulant out of competition or a trace amount of something where they raised the level because it's such a problem. And the same, we could talk about Jarrell Miller, the heavyweight, who had numerous positive tests that cost him the shot at the heavyweight championship against Anthony Joshua. So again, not every drug or performance-enhancing drug test case is equal. It's like anything in life. There are grades of seriousness to it. In the case of what happened with Oscar Valdez, again, from the science point of view, it's not serious because it's not against the WADA rules, period. I don't know what more I can say about it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm glad you said that because we work for DAZN and Canelo was or is a DAZN fighter. It's like we're Canelo lovers when we say it. But listen, what if
I like Canelo also, but I would, if I thought he was dirty as a $3 bill because of it, I would say so, man. Anybody that knows me knows I just keep it real.
Absolutely. Now, check it out. What if we had a little phentermine and clenbuterol and we gave that to Holyfield? Would this be a fight that you would say, it's okay if Holyfield fights Vitor?
You know, the Holyfield Vitor thing, obviously it came about in a very short period of time because, as we all know, it was supposed to be Oscar De La Hoya fighting Vitor Belfort in a sanctioned boxing match in the Staples Center in Los Angeles because he came down with COVID and they were trying to save that event. Plus, they still had an obligation to Evander that he was taking Triller to arbitration over for a fight that did not come off against Kevin McBride, where they were on the hook for money. And rather than fight the legal battle, they were able to work it out where Holyfield will fill in. The California State Athletic Commission would not approve or sanction that Holyfield Vitor Belfort fight. So therefore, Triller had to move the event to a place where they would sanction it. Florida has some different rules and thresholds for what can be sanctioned and not sanctioned, and therefore the fight is going to be in the Seminole Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida, in an 8-rounder on Saturday night. And you know, I have mixed emotions about the fight taking place because Evander is a legend of the sport of boxing. Belfort is a legend of MMA. You know, he doesn't have a lot of experience in boxing, rather, but Evander hasn't fought for 11 years or so, and he's also 58 years old and soon to be 59. So, you know, do I love the idea of that happening? Not really, but I will say this, guys. You know, Evander, he's in better shape than most people, you know, half his age. I mean, he looked in tremendous shape. Slow. I saw the video of him hitting mitts. Phenomenal condition, just slow as you would expect an athlete that's been around that long at that age.
What do you think about Fury and his list of fights that he has? He threw Dillian White in there and Derek Chisora at the end.
I mean, look, if Tyson Fury can, I saw the same list that you mentioned. If he can pull that list off and fight all those fights in that sort of short period of time, that would be phenomenal, because it would be the complete opposite of what's happened in the recent times, where he hasn't fought for almost 2 years or 2 years or so since he had the second fight with Deontay in 2019. I'll believe it when I see it, but I appreciate the desire. Certainly, hopefully it will come off. We'll see that third fight with Deontay Wilder coming up next month, and then again, knock on wood, all things happen. If Anthony Joshua was successful in his defense against Alexander Usyk, hopefully they can get together. And obviously, if they're able to make one fight, it'll be a 2-fight deal. So I guess theoretically, we would see 2 fights. And if after that he wants to go for some of the other names that he hasn't faced, that'd be the Dillian White, or I'm not really sure where Derek Chisora comes from, but
that's something he used to mention that years ago. I think they're buddies. He fought him twice. I don't know
why he already beat him. Yeah, he beat him 2 times.
Twice.
So
yeah, but what I was thinking, me and Ak was like, okay, where do we put him? Let's say if he actually fulfills that list, where would we put him at as one of the greats? Because what I said is that, well, yes, I guess he'd be one of the greats, but in reality, he would only have defeated Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua. And Dillian White as well.
Those are still pretty good victories. Not to mention, he does have the win against Vladimir Klitschko to take the title back in 2015. I mean, look, if somehow, some way, Tyson Fury could run the table on those fights you mentioned, which would mean him beating Wilder in the third fight, which would give him, 2 wins against a draw in that rivalry, 2 wins against Anthony Joshua by your thought that if he could run the table, and then you throw in a Dillian White, who's obviously one of the best contenders out there, has an interim title for what that's worth, and then you throw in a good solid veteran like a Derek Chisora for good measure. I mean, then Tyson Fury, he's pretty much punched the Hall of Fame ticket, and he's going to be considered one of the great heavyweights, certainly of this time, probably the best heavyweight of this time. But
top 3, because Ak was saying top 3, and I'm like, well, maybe, I guess.
Top 3 of what? Of what generation?
Of all time.
Of all time?
Yes.
No, I didn't say top 3.
Yes, you did.
I said, would you? No. I said, would you put him in top 3? That was my quote.
Okay.
But let's.
The answer to that question is again, all due respect to Tyson Fury, who is a tremendous fighter, but it's going to take a lot more than those wins to put him top 3 of all time.
That's all.
I agree with you. But Dan, listen. Well, you mentioned Usyk and Josh. Before we get out, we want to get a couple of predictions. At least your thoughts on these particular fights. I know most people are picking Joshua over Usyk, who's a very skilled, slick fighter, decorated amateur. So it won't be easy. But how do you see that fight playing out realistically?
I think it's hard to pick against Anthony Joshua in that fight, and I have tremendous respect for Usyk, undisputed cruiserweight champion, Olympic gold medalist, massive amateur career, all-time great amateur. Probably arguably top 2 or 3 cruiserweights of all time based on the resume. And he's a worthy contender for the heavyweight title based on those accolades. But in terms of his boxing in the ring as a heavyweight, he's been, the pandemic obviously delayed the schedule. He's had some injuries that kind of kept him out of the ring. He had a biceps injury that forced the fights to be postponed. The point is, as a heavyweight, he's only had 2 fights. A middling performance in a stoppage against Witherspoon, and then he had the fight that was awfully close against Chisora. So I don't feel like he's looked that good as a heavyweight. Meanwhile, Anthony Joshua, is at a certain level that we know. We've seen him, the types of guys he's defeated. I think it's a tough fight from the standpoint that he's going to have to figure out the movement and the slickness of Usyk, at least in the first few rounds. But I think by the time we get into the later rounds, the bigger, stronger guy with the confidence and the power in front of the home crowd, I just feel like he's going to find a way to get the job done. And maybe the big punching power, he connects and he gets him out of there, or he just is able to, get by and win 7-8 rounds of the fight.
All right, and Canelo Alvarez, Caleb Plant, slick fighter as well. Does he have a shot against the pound-for-pound king?
I said this when the fight was made in a video that I did with one of the YouTube guys that I do some interviews with from time to time, and I was like, you know what? I don't think that Caleb has much of a legit chance to win the fight. Caleb Plant saw that video, and on the night of the Manny Pacquiao or Dennis Ugas fight in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, his publicist brought Caleb up to the media section to do like a little scrum to talk about the fight, even though it hadn't been formally announced. And look, Caleb, I have a lot of respect for him. He's a great guy. I've known him pretty much his entire career, covered a lot of his fights. He's an honest dude and a good guy. And where a lot of fighters would get really annoyed, wouldn't talk to you and act like a real prima donna and just talk down to you and all that sort of stuff. He took a minute when he was asked about it, because I asked him a question about the fight, and he says, by the way, I saw that video. I want to prove you wrong. And if I win the fight, I want you to come up to me and tell me that after the fight that you were wrong. And I'm like, no problem. My point is, he's a professional. Now, I still stand by my opinion that I don't really give him a big chance to actually win the fight. My perspective on it, and I listen, if he wins, I said to this to Caleb on the night of that Pacquiao fight in front of all the other writers, I said, listen, man, if you win the fight, I'm going to be really happy for you. God bless you. But my point of view about how it will unfold, because I don't make this personal. I'm just thinking about like my experience of covering boxing. I look at Canelo Alvarez as being still in his prime. He does pretty much everything well. His hand speed's decent. His foot speed's decent. His defense is very underrated. Obviously, you guys have watched him and covered him. You know he's a great puncher. He can punch with his right hand. He can punch with his left hand. He goes to the head. He goes to the body. And he's got a great chin. So the point I made was, tell me what's the weapon, what's the A level weapon that Caleb Plant brings to the ring that's going to be enough to allow him to win 7 rounds against the big favorite in the fight. And I just don't know what that is. He might win a couple of rounds by boxing. He's a slick guy for sure. I don't know if we know for sure about his chin because he hasn't been tested in terms of being in real trouble in a fight so far. But again, I think that Canelo is the #1 pound for pound fighter on the planet. And again, when you pick against a guy, it's not a knock on the guy you're picking against. It's more of you're applauding the guy you are picking. So I just felt like that Canelo is at a certain level, and all these other guys who are very solid, good quality fighters, whether it's Billy Joe Saunders or Callum Smith or Caleb Plant or, Charlo or you name it, they're at levels, but that Canelo at this moment in time is just another notch above them. And that's how I feel, and I'm sticking by it. I think that Canelo definitely wins that fight.
All right, well, on that note, Dan, always a pleasure chopping it up with you. Make sure you guys subscribe to Fight Freaks Unite. With Dan Rayfield, take it easy, champ. We'll see you around.
All right, guys, I appreciate it. Hope to see you guys down the road, man.